Hey, what's going on, everybody? My name is Corey, better known as the Seaman, and I want to welcome you to another edition of the Seaman's Cinema Sit Down. As you maybe can tell, I don't have my spotlight on me. This is natural light because it's the middle of the day. I took a little nap after our coverage this morning because I was whooped. You might not have been able to tell it in my non-spoiler because of all the excitement I had about this show, but afterwards I was like, we need a nap. But we've napped. Our buddy's back up on the screen, and you know what we're getting ready to talk about. So why don't you pull up a chair, take a seat. We're getting ready to dive in spoiler-filled into Loki, Episode 2, The Variant. And as I mentioned, I did my non-spoiler first thing this morning. If you haven't seen the episode or you haven't seen the non-spoiler where I'll give you most of my overall thoughts, boom, you can check it out right up there. But now we gotta shift our gears into the way more fun conversation, which is talking about everything that happens in Episode 2 for Loki. And before we really dive in, give you some overall spoiler thoughts. If you watch that non-spoiler, I gave it a 4.6 out of 5 versus the 4.5 from Episode 1 because I like this one a little bit more, and it's mostly because of its third act. The way this episode builds, very similar to the first one, and they do a lot of similar things. There's a lot of exposition dumps, but they're disguised in entertaining sequences, or just entertaining banter back and forth between Mobius and Loki. And while all that stuff is there, we're continuing to build that foundation, for the TVA, understanding more. This episode is named correctly once again. The Variant is an excellent name for this episode because we go into the fact that, what the Variant is, which we touched on obviously in the first episode, but more so to the Loki effect, right? You have the Variant that they are chasing, you have the fact that this Loki is a Variant, and then Mobius actually talks about the fact that there are all sorts of Loki variants, and none of them are the same. They all look a little different. They all have slightly different power sets, and you get to see all these different Lokis, and it's one of those things that again reaffirms the fact that there is obviously a multiverse inside of this sacred timeline, because you couldn't have all of these different Lokis, and he's got the most variants that are tracked down and pruned by the TVA than any other person in the world. So clearly, it is obvious that all of these different timelines or universes exist in this main timeline, and for whatever reason, Loki seems to be the one guy who's constantly trying to mess with it, which is why it's so fun to watch this Loki working with the TVA to most likely benefit himself. The 2012 version of Loki, like we talked about last week, fascinating concept to go back to that guy and then show that guy his history in the MCU so that he is more vulnerable than he's maybe ever been before, but also more dangerous. He knows what his outcome is if he doesn't figure things out. And once again, in this episode, Loki is doing things on the fly, and he's messing with, things and people, and he's, certainly playing all sorts of trickster-type games. And I love how the episode this time around directly talks about that and directly gets certain things out of the way, right? The big spoiler, we now know that cloaked hooded Loki is Lady Loki. Or at least, most likely, Lady Loki. We'll get into that as we get toward the end when we're talking about the whole episode. But we get the reveal on her, we get the reveal on what her plan is, or at least a piece of what her plan is, with all of those reset charges. And I love the fact that the episode gives you those answers right away. 2 episodes in, we already have 2 questions answered, where if this was WandaVision, which I think this has a similar vibe to as far as the way it makes you think about what could be going on behind the scenes, WandaVision would have stretched this out all the way to the end, right? So boom, right out the gate. 2 things, get it away, because it's not what's super important. I mean, even Lady Loki says, this isn't about you, and we'll talk about that. But I just love the way that the episode kind of plays with all of this stuff. And is able to give us, really good payoffs while continually presenting just an amazing piece of filmmaking and television show making. I mean, you're going to hear me talk about this through the whole series. But Mike Waldron's writing is through the roof phenomenal, and again, it is just unreal how good his writing is, specifically for this version of Loki and the banter between Loki and Mobius. The way they use that banter to deliver exposition to us so that we can understand more, and also show that they're almost Waldron knows that we'll theorize things, so Mobius should be theorizing about things. And there's a moment in the episode that we'll talk about where Loki is dude, I'm always 10 steps, exactly what I said last week. I'm always 10 steps ahead of you. I've got a plan from jump, and right away Mobius is just Yeah, you want to get close to the timekeepers so that you can take advantage of them and, seize control of the TVA's power. Like, I know what you're doing. Like, you're the trickster god. You're going to lie more than anybody else. And the way they play with that, specifically in this episode, it's really, really, really good stuff. And what Waldron is building, oh man, I can't wait when we dive in to talk about all the little things that he's setting up. And then when you're looking at the production value and the directing and the way this thing looks, I mean, Kate Herron is crushing it, dude. Like I said, this episode I give a little edge on the first because of that third act, and so much of the third act's impressiveness, besides just the writing and the performances, is the directing, man. Like, the way that scene plays, the way it builds to the end, and the way it visually delivers everything. I mean, when the lights go red, oh, it pops so big at the end of the episode, and I just love everything she's doing. And then, of course, outside of the acting and the directing and the writing, and I know I haven't really directly said the acting, but I mean, this episode in particular, Loki and Mobius, Hiddleston and Wilson are just phenomenal the whole episode. And everybody else kind of gets these little small wonderful moments that we'll talk about. But the other big winner in this episode for me is the score. This score is absolutely fire and has been all season long. The way that it plays with the soundtrack, the way that the score builds tension or uneasiness. I mean, there are these really haunting kind of string notes throughout the episode, and just the way it kind of keeps you on edge, and even the music in and of itself in that score kind of keeps you like guessing, right? Like, which way is the score playing? Like, is it building to something good? Is it building to something bad? Is it building to a mystery? And the way you just combine all these elements, it's so expertly done, man. Like, I can't wait to see what we get with the rest of this show, because like I said last week, I think this thing is going to get better every single week. And 2 episodes in, it is the furthest along out of all 3 shows. It is established and accomplished so much for the world building, as well as delivering huge payoffs. Yes, Lady Loki, we might have seen her coming a little bit, but Lady Loki opening the multiverse, I sure as hell didn't see that coming. And that was one of those moments where it's like, I thought those reset charges were going to build to the climax of the season. Nah, build to the climax of episode 2. Where do we go next? I can't even imagine anything other than Kang the Conqueror. And I tweeted this out earlier this morning as I was kind of going through some of my notes after my first watch. I was like, you know what? When did they wrap shooting? Mid-December. When did Jonathan Majors get cast as Kang the Conqueror? December 12th. That seems eerily close to each other. Maybe there's a connection. I'm telling you, man, this show is building to Kang. I think Lady Loki is working with him. And if that's not the case, he may somehow be connected to the TVA too, because I sure as hell don't trust Rabana Renslayer whatsoever. But I think it's more likely that Lady Loki is helping disrupt the sacred time stream so that Kang can start conquering different areas. There's a tease of all the places that she drops those reset charges at the end. Like, if you go frame by frame, you can see all the different places. And some of them have historical relevance. Some of them are just relevant places in the MCU. And some of them, I don't know what they mean. But if she drops those reset charges in all those places, those could theoretically be setting up the ability for multiple versions of Kang, like in the comics, to conquer different areas of the world and the multiverse and the time stream. And I hope that's where we're going. So, 2 episodes in, man, I am so psyched about what this show is doing. But now, it is time to first see my reactions, and then we are going to dive into this episode and break down top to bottom. So let's take a look at what the Seaman was doing while he was watching episode 2 of Loki. Oh, snap. Definitely Lady Loki. They're trying too hard to make it seem like it's gotta be Lady Loki.
Come on, Loki. What is it?
It's when the TVA can no longer reset the Nexus event. Very subtle. Well done.
I don't want anybody out there to forget what you are.
Set fire to the palace.
No, just stop. Don't set fire to the palace.
I can do whatever I want to do, and it would never matter. It wouldn't go against the dictates of the timeline, because...
Oh, God.
Nice to see you. Nice to see you. Because never stabbing her in the back. That's such a boring form of betrayal.
Loki, I've studied almost every moment of your entire life. You've literally stabbed people in the back like 50 times.
I'd never do it again, because it got old. Okay, look. You don't trust me, you can trust one thing. I'd love to be right.
Absolutely not. Gather round for a briefing.
Rock's heart is a vast.
Oh,
Me, I presume.
Please. If anyone's anyone, you're me.
that's so awesome.
How nice to meet you. I miss Randy.
Oh,
Thank you for helping me stall.
Lady Loki.
This isn't about you.
Wait, why would... Is that all of them? What is going on?
Where are they going? That's not possible.
What?
This is Analyst 1118E, reporting in code 000. Branch is rapidly forming at a somebody just bought the sacred timeline.
Less this week around, not as many big pops, but still, like, this show just finds ways to make me smile, make me laugh. Tom Hiddleston, I mean, his performance, man, it hits all the check boxes that you want with Loki. And while I like Loki as a character because of Hiddleston's performance, you know, he's so good at playing, like, can I trust him? Can I not trust him? And the fact that it's the 2012 version of him, like, is he scheming like something dangerous rather than scheming something redeemable? Because he's not that guy yet. Although, I do think he has a genuine like for Mobius and vice versa. I think they have a little bit of a respect for each other, and I think they're a little bit more transparent with each other than anybody else in the show. While they're both playing each other, I think they are also kind of honest with each other. And I'm loving watching how all that unfolds, and most of it, like you saw, puts a smile on my face, makes me laugh, and we got a couple nice whoa moments. And of course, the big one was the opening of the multiverse. This isn't the creation of the multiverse, right? Like we've been saying, I think the multiverse exists inside of this one timeline. Each universe has to play by those rules. So that's not the beginning of the multiverse. I think it's always been in existence, but this is the opening. I think this is the ability for, Kang or just the outcome of whatever it is that Lady Loki is doing potentially for Kang could be opening the multiverse for, different universes to start colliding into each other, which could lead to the Multiverse of Madness. The Spider-Man movie could answer a whole lot of questions. So, as you saw, man, I certainly enjoyed the episode, and it did give you a little bit of a wow zing right at the end, and a really strong third act. So let's now rip through this thing top to bottom, because so much happened in this episode, and I love that we start with a cold open that showcases another hunter and her Minutemen chasing down Loki, and we go to Oshkosh, Wisconsin in 1985. We're at a Renaissance fair, and the TVA shows up. They're walking around, the Renaissance people are like, "What? You're dressed wrong," and they're like, just ignore them, keep doing whatever. And the line that this one girl says, she's like, some of us kind of need this. And it's one of those things where, especially in the world of comic books and nerd culture, like that's something that we say all the time about comic books and about comic book movies. Man, we need this. So to kind of highlight another area of nerd culture, and someone coming in and disrespecting it, like much to us comic book nerds, it's like, hey, show a little respect, man. Like, us people over here, we need this. So I just love that little one-off line from that extra. And then we follow C20 and her team into a tent. And this is, like, one of my favorite moments of the entire show so far, just because the sequence is staged beautifully. The inside of the tent is dark. Only torches are lighting it. So you already have this kind of eerie uneasiness. The score that's kicking in here is also kind of eerie and uneasy. And you're like, something is up. And C20 immediately recognizes it. And, like, this is a trap. Be on guard. Like, he is definitely here somewhere. And, you know, this tent is obviously used for some sort of performance show. Kind of gave me like a medieval times type vibe where it's like, hey, we've got a princess, she's trapped, and there's an evil guy. And the question is, can a hero come in and save the day? And what the announcer actually says, I believe, is somewhere along the lines of like, will evil prevail, or are we holding out for a hero? And then that, you know, I need a hero beat kicks in, and you get this just wonderfully choreographed and you know, music sunk up sequence that just plays so well. But because of that eerie build up, like, the music not only kicks and gets you up, but it also kind of also plays into that kind of uneasy vibe. And I love the fact that on the announcer you hear that question, will evil prevail, or will, you know, we be holding out for a hero? When I need a hero comes in, it's all cluing you to, like, obviously evil is going to prevail in this situation. You see Lady Loki possess C20 with just one quick touch of her face. And that's one of those things where when we get into Mobius talking about the variants and how they're all a little bit different visually and they have different skill sets and powers, this is a power that we've never seen our Loki use. And yes, Loki does kind of call, you know, Lady Loki on it, like, possession, come on, like, that's amateurish. But, like, is that just a defense mechanism where he's kind of upset that he can't possess people, or at least to our knowledge, we've never seen him do that. And the other thing that is crazy scary with that is that, you know, Lady Loki not only possesses C20, but can go around and do whatever she wants. Like, she is almost controlling multiple versions of herself to a degree. And that's fascinating because that plays in big time at the end. And I just love that little setup. Like, Loki could literally be anybody and also be operating and doing stuff. So, like, it's such a fascinating thing. And you see this combo of C20 and Lady Loki take out all the Minutemen. C20 drops kind of as a distraction for the last one that Lady Loki kills, and then grabs C20, grabs her little phone device thing, opens up a door, and walks through. And then, boom, our title card comes up, and you're like, oh, what is Lady Loki up to? The whole sequence, I mean, just, it popped so big. And just, like I said, well staged, well shot, well choreographed. Like, it just works so well. It's the perfect build setup for this episode that is obviously going to lean into, like I said, the variants and the fact that she's a variant, or Loki is a variant. And from that cold open, we jump to Loki learning about the TVA and all the guides and rules and regulations from Miss Minutes. And you have this little holographic Miss Minutes clock talking to Loki and telling him things. And when he's not answering, she's like, are you paying attention? Are you even trying? To the point where, like, Loki's like, are you real, or are you like a hologram? And she's, you know, like a study type program. And she's like, kind of both. And you see him go to, like, swat her with this magazine about jet skis, which we'll play in a little bit later. And you see her kind of jumping around, and then boom, she jumps into the computer, and then you find out that you're actually at Mobius's desk, and he comes to snag Loki, brings him along, and again, I love the banter and the way that Hiddleston plays with this. Like, that whole little sequence, man, he's having a ball. You can see him enjoying himself. And Tara Strong's voice work is so good. Like, we're only getting little snippets of Miss Minutes, and already she is, like, one of my favorite characters. Because I just like, Strong's delivery is so good, and it fits so well into that little clock, and that little back and forth was a lot of fun. Then we see, you know, Wilson grab him to take him out for the Oshkosh incident. You know, C20 hasn't come back, and they're on the move. And you get a lot of Loki and Mobius walking and talking in this episode. Like I said, the movement, the banter allows for these exposition dumps, but the walking and talking, best time to do it. So to kind of get him to go, he's like, here, he gives him a jacket, and he opens it up. It's a TVA jacket. Loki puts it on. He's real proud, and like, those are the small things that, like, really make stuff pop, because that proud moment is about to get shattered by B-15 in just a moment. So, like, Loki and, you know, Mobius go to this briefing. B-15 is kind of filling everybody in on what happened in Oshkosh, and Loki's being Loki. You know, she says, you know, if you see a Loki, you take that variant out. He's like, obviously like the not good one. Like, don't take me out, please. And he says something. Almost everything he says pisses off Masaku's B-15, but he says something along the lines that kind of... Actually, no, I'm sorry. I think you get Owen Wilson talking about like the dangers of Loki, and this is where, you get these holographic images where you see like a Tour de France Loki. You see like this hulking beast version of Loki. There's a frost giant Loki. And that, again, talks to this idea of a multiverse inside of the sacred timeline. And as he's talking about like the different variations on his powers, but the most commonly used ones are, the illusion projection, and he's kind of going down a list, and all of a sudden like Loki kind of interjects and is like, duplication casting. And Owen Wilson's like, what do you mean? He's like, well, they're two distinctly different things. Like, illusion projection, you're actually just projecting like a mirror image of yourself based off of something that you can think about, right? You can create an illusion. But a duplication casting is actually recreating your molecular structure in a holographic type image, the way that we saw Loki do it in Avengers. And just listen to him break it down, man. You're like, he's so much smarter than everybody. And like at the end, he's even like, but you all knew that was something different. And like Mobius, like, all right, pipe down, show off. And again, this kind of sets up Masaku for a nice kick to Loki, where he's kind of on a roll, and she's like, hey, what's it say on the back of your jacket? And he's like, oh, very so. Says variant on the back of the jacket. And she's like, yeah, we're reminding you like who you are. Like, no matter what you think you can do, how helpful you think you can be, at the end of the day, you are a variant. And at least the B-15, that's a variant that should be eliminated. So I love that. Like, there's such small back and forth between Hiddleston and Masaku, but they play off each other so well when there are. Nevertheless, they team up to go check out Oshkosh, and, right away, Wilson basically is like, I'm going to take Loki with me. He's coming with, and again, we get this kind of walking and talking, and you can get more exposition thrown in there. But one of these things that I wasn't expecting was the fact that, like, we were going to get confirmations to ideas that we were already having. And you get this wonderful back and forth with Loki and Wilson, where, like, he kind of is pushing Wilson's buttons a little bit, or Mobius's buttons. And he's getting frustrated because Mobius has a job to do. And at this point, he doesn't have time for all the talky Loki. And he just kind of, like, gut punches him. Is like, oh, yeah, I know. You have, like, plans, and you're 10 steps ahead of us because you want to take over the TVA. Big deal. And he just kind of checks him right away and uses that, as a way of, like, this other Loki is superior to you, man. Like, we are chasing this guy. This is serious business. Like, you gotta focus up because we gotta catch this more superior Loki. And, like, pushing Loki's buttons kind of is the thing that's driving him to, do everything to help the TVA out so that he doesn't end up getting pruned or put back into a timeline where, like, ultimately he's going to die at the hands of Thanos. So I just love this banter. And when we get to the crime scene, everybody's, like, looking around, and, Loki's like, I know what's going on. And he has this wonderful monologue where he is very obviously playing this group of Minutemen. But at the same time, you're like, is he being honest? Like, when he starts to break down the area, at first you're like, oh shoot, like, maybe this is a secondary trap. Like, Lady Loki is on the outside. Like, he looks around and he's like, there's a saying in Asgard, I think he goes out, where he's like, it's like the wolf's mouth, man. He's like, you guys and Asgardians, the TVA and the Asgardians, you're all pompous and just walk right into trap after trap after trap that I'm setting for you, this other variant version. And he's like, while I have sharp teeth, I also have sharp ears. And he's like, this is a trap. Like, if we walk out there, you're walking right into exactly what this group walked into. And then he keeps going. And all of a sudden you go from, like, semi-buying it to, like, he's just stalling. Like, what is it that he's trying to do? And he kind of gives us some answers, potentially, to what it is that he's doing while he's stalling. But it kind of seems as he's building, like, okay, we're going to go out there. He's, no. He wants me. Let me go handle this. I can catch the guy for you. And, like, at that point, now I'm starting to swing back to, like, oh, shoot, maybe he is not playing everybody. And right away, like, he has this little kind of close-up interaction with Wilson. And Mobius is like, Nah, he's lying. Let's lock this down. You saw the line getting closer and closer to that red line, and like they were like at the last minute. Right then, Mobius is just like, nope, he's lying. He was trying to get out so that he'd be solo. He can use his magic outside the TVA, and he can maybe get away again. So he's like, it's all of these things where anytime Loki is talking, it's like do you believe what he's saying? If you don't believe what he's saying, why is he saying a lie? Like, this play just exists through this whole episode and thus far through the whole series. And it's something that you really, really kind of enjoy every time Loki's doing it. And I like that the show is keeping us on our toes, because we're used to a very particular Loki. Like, we've been riding with a guy who's redeemed himself, and that is a guy that you can root and like for. And you kind of have to, in the back of your mind, remind yourself, like, yeah, it's easy to like and root for this guy because we love Hiddleston and his performance as Loki, but, like, this is a Loki that's not a good guy yet. Like, he's still kind of a bad guy. And that just keeps you on your toes with everything that's going on. I just love the back and forth, like the way that both Loki and Mobius know how to push each other's buttons and know how to kind of play with each other, but also know when each other is playing. Like, it's just genius stuff being delivered by these two guys, and the scene ends with them setting a reset charge to reset the sequence, and as that reset is happening, we see back in the TVA, a message going out. You see the branch disappearing as the prune happens, and then you see like an MIA on C20 be sent out. So obviously anybody that's out, looking after this Loki business is also going to be looking for C20 as well. From there, we jump to Mobius and Renslayer in Renslayer's office, and I tell you, every time we get a scene with Renslayer, or we are somewhere where there are statues of these freaking timekeepers, the Wizard of Oz vibes are so strong. I mean, the conversation that you have throughout this whole sequence, like, Mobius even points out the fact that, like, he's never seen the timekeepers, and, like, the way he says it, the way Hiddleston kind of questions things later in the episode, just constantly make you go, like, are there really any timekeepers? Like, is this some big, elaborate hoax? Like, we know Renslayer has connections to Kang the Conqueror in the comics, so is he somehow involved? Is this all some sort of trickery, or is he, possibly working somewhere else? And if he is working, say, with Lady Loki on something else, what's the deal with Renslayer being in the TVA, and why is she the only person that ever gets to meet or interact with the timekeepers? It's all these things that just kind of feel like they're being put out there as rules and regulations and codes and things to live by to keep protected the fact that maybe they're not real. I can't quite place it, because, like, there are times where I'm like, maybe the TVA is legit, and it's honestly a place I'd like to spend more time. Like, it's an interesting group, and if you kind of flip them bad, you might not be able to go back there. But whatever it is, I just have this uneasy feeling that whatever the timekeepers are doing, or if they're actually in existence, it all stems from Renslayer, and the show is setting you up to feel that way. Like, when we show up in the office, the first thing we see, 3 statues of the timekeepers, and you kind of push in on them as this eerie kind of, I want to say that it's like some sort of a string instrument, but it sounds like this eerie voice kind of, like, so creepy. And then you actually see like a tape player playing on the wall, and you're like, oh, that's what Renslayer's listening. If Renslayer's listening to music like that, I'm telling you, you can't trust that woman at all. But, like I said, the banter here is also great, and again, provides more exposition on the TVA and things that are going on. And I love that, like, the other thing that's all over the room are all of these, like, trophies from different investigations and whatnot. It seems like Mobius has delivered most of those to Renslayer, and it seems like they have a very close relationship. But even Renslayer notes that, like, he's not the only analyst that she works closely with. 2 different times he points out, like, where did that come from? I didn't give that to you. And same thing when he gets a pen at the end of the episode, or at the end of the scene. Where he's like, this must have come from that other analyst you keep talking about. And the question is who is that other analyst? And again, how does that play into whatever is going on with Renslayer? But the mystery, even Mobius is aware of it, but he goes along with it and kind of gives us insight into why a little bit later on. One of the other things, too, that I love in this bit right here is while Mobius is fighting to keep using Loki, even though they just botched, technically, a mission. And Renslayer is not too happy about it because the timekeepers are not too happy about it. And apparently they are so invested and involved, like they are giving more information to Renslayer and more details or things to do than they've ever done before because they are so caught up in this case. The other thing that she points out is that, like, there's similarities between Mobius and Loki, and there's, like I said, this kind of respect for the two of them between each other that's starting to kind of build. And I think it's the fact that, like, they are similar, right? Like, apparently Mobius doesn't like to play by the rules, even as far as, like, just using a coaster. Like, he goes and he sets his glass down on the table, and you can see a bunch of rings, and he's like, well, the rings were already there. And, like, Renslayer's like, yeah, from all the glasses that you put there, use a coaster. And it's just, like, a little thing that kind of tips you to the fact that, like, you know, Mobius might play the rules similarly to the way Loki can bend and play the rules. And I like that there are these similarities between the two because it plays so well on screen with them. You know, and as you know, Mobius is kind of defending Loki and the usage of Loki and why he's using him. Like, Renslayer's like, you have to remember, like, stop fanboying. Like, we know he's your favorite Loki. And she doesn't say it there, but somebody says, you know, something about a favorite Loki toward the end of the episode, I think. And it might be Masaku. But, you know, she's like, you have to remember, like, Loki is evil. He's an evil, lying scourge. And that is his role inside the sacred timeline. He's always going to be that. That's why we have all these variant problems that we have. And, you know, Mobius eventually kind of wins her over in the sense, like, look, we learned something about this variant. He likes to stall, which means at some point the other one is going to stall, and that's how we'll catch them, because they might be different, but they're still Lokis. Allow me to use Loki and his insights to catch this Loki. Renslayer finally kind of gives in, gives him some papers to sign. That's where you see this pen, and the camera takes its time to show you what it's written on the pen. It's like one of those like freebie giveaways, and it says Franklin D. Roosevelt High School. I have no clue who could come from Franklin D. Roosevelt High School, and who that potential other analyst could be just on that piece of information alone. You know, the best guess would be that it's someone connected to Brooklyn, because that's the most famous FDR high school. But other than that, I don't know. But the show certainly took its time to be like, hey, look at where this pen came from. And that, I think, is probably going to play into the overall mystery of, like, who is behind the scenes pulling these strings. But with the go, Loki and Mobius are once again walking and talking, man. And this time, they're heading to do, some legit work. And you have Loki breaking down what makes a trickster interesting, right? Like, when Mobius comes out, he's like, so what's going on, you know? And, like, look, like, you learned something. Like, this is, like, that was my showcase of, like, this is, you can't trust everything, right? Like, the most interesting aspect of a trickster is that a trickster knows they're a trickster and that other people know that he's a trickster. So, like, obviously they're going to think it's a trick sometimes. So sometimes you got to play it straight, but then sometimes you got to play it as not straight because they could be thinking that maybe you're playing. Like, it's one of these round and round type circle conversation monologues that we get from Loki that accurately describes everything he has done in the episode and the series to this point and the things that he's best at. And again, you get some of this back and forth where it's like he's waxing poetic and Mobius is like, I don't have time for this. Like, I need you to, like, button up and put it together because we need to catch this guy. And it brings me to one of my favorite moments in the episode where Loki just kind of walks right up to Mobius and he fixes his tie and he's like, it's cute that you think you could manipulate me, but I've been 10 steps ahead the whole time and I've got a plan. I've had a plan all along since I got here. And Mobius is like, yeah, you know, this is that moment where he's like, yeah, I know, you want to, you know, get a meeting in front of the timekeepers and then hustle them and seize control of the TVA. Exactly what I posited last week. And it's one of those moments where it's like, damn, man, like, the show knows where we're going. So let's not waste any time with you having to guess. Let's just throw it out there so it's done, over. We can move on to the next interesting mystery that's going on. So he, you know, again, Loki is just kind of like, but then why me? Like, what are you pulling me in for? What's your big thing? And he's like, look, there's two options here. I either see you as a scared boy, I feel bad for you, and I want to give you a way maybe to redeem yourself, because I feel bad for what he calls the ice runt. Or, I just want to catch this guy, and I'm going to tell you anything that you want to hear. Like, that's that open honesty between the two, where you're like, they are very in tune, and they read each other quite well, where it's like, I'm not going to BS you. Sometimes I'm just going to say what you need to hear. And it's the same thing that Loki is doing to Mobius. And like I said, I just love the way that they're working together and the way that they play with each other. And from there, we go to, like, the TVA's library with all the different case files and all the different files about everything in the known universe, it would seem. This thing is huge, and they come down this crazy looking elevator, and the elevator comes into a bank of, you guessed it, 3 statues of the timekeepers, and once again, we kind of zoom in, and the focus is on that middle timekeeper. I don't know what exactly is going on. Like, is that Kang? Like it's all this. I just got the same 2 things going on. Like, Kang is either behind what's going on at the TVA, or he's behind what's going on with Lady Loki. But either way, like, every time the timekeepers are either a bust of them or a statue, like, we spend time like, hey, look at them, and hey, let's zoom in kind of eerily, and you get like that eerie kind of music where it's like, I just don't trust anything that's going on at the TVA. But we get into this room, and basically, Mobius is like, look, we got to go through all of the files, from all these things, try to figure out what we're missing. And they go through all the case files, and Mobius goes, I think, to get a snack, and Loki sits down and starts going through the files, and right away he's like, you kind of get like, clearly he's gone through a small stack, and it's just like, oh, look at that, man, like, it's the same story. Loki shows up, steals, reset charges, kills a bunch of TVA agents, like, it's the same thing over and over and over again. And he finally gets up, and he walks over to, like, what would be your main librarian, and there's this rickety bell, and he, like, says 3 words, 2 or 3 things to her, she just doesn't respond, so he hits this, like, real rickety, gross-looking old bell, and she then spins, like, can I help you? And he's like, yeah. I'm doing work for the TVA. He's got his TVA jacket on and clearly thinks this lady doesn't know who he is. And is like, yeah, so can I get all the info on the creation of the TVA? She's like, classified. How about everything from the beginning of time? Classified. How about the end of time? Classified. What can I have? And she hands him another Loki Laufeyson file. And it's like, boom, right there's the gut punch. Like, oh, everybody in the TVA knows who I am. Like, I can't just, like, act like I'm anybody other than myself. So he takes the file, and as he's opening and going through it, he comes across the Ragnarok file. And then the way that he visually watched the things that he watched from his MCU history, here he reads out what happens. And, the fact that all of Asgard is destroyed, almost 10,000 Asgardians are killed. They have to flee. And you get another one of these emotional Loki moments where the camera kind of pushes in, you can see the tear welling up in his eye, and then all of a sudden he notices that it says, no variance energy detected. And he goes from emotional to lighting up and literally is like, look at me over here, I figured it out, oh my gosh, Mobius, come here, I figured it out, man. It's all about natural disasters, like apocalypses, that's what the answer is. And he kind of starts with this whole aspect of, Ragnarok. Are you familiar with it? And of course, Mobius is like, yeah, everything that happened, I'm sorry. And he's like, no, that's the thing. An apocalypse is set in stone. Like, when an apocalypse happens, you can't change anything, right? Like, Surtur is always going to destroy Ragnarok. So you literally could do anything in there, and it's not going to create any kind of variance spikes. Like, it is exactly what it is, man. Like, if Surtur hits that thing and you're just hanging out right before it happens, anything you do, the TVA will never know because it's null and void, because the ultimate outcome is always going to be the destruction and death of all those people. I suppose the only thing that could really create one of those variation lines is if you saved all the people, right? Like, maybe that would change it. But if you're just hanging out in these areas, you'll go undetected. And Mobius is kind of intrigued, and he's like, all right, well, what are you saying here? He's like, let's test the theory. Like, let's go someplace. So they go to Pompeii, 79 AD, right before the volcano erupts and destroys the entire city. And I love this. Like, they get there, and Mobius is like, all right, just small stuff. Like, do you know how to make bird sounds? And Loki's like, what are you talking about, man? Like, Mobius is like, if we do anything too crazy, it's gonna create a spike, and we're not gonna be able to stop. And Loki's like, watch. And he goes up and he lets all these goats out of a cage, and he starts hooting and hollering and drawing all this attention to himself, and then he starts speaking Italian and basically telling all the people in this little village, like, this volcano is going to erupt, it's going to destroy this whole location, you can't do anything about it, you're all gonna die. And he's just going on and on and on, and nobody is buying anything, and all of a sudden, you see the volcano go off in the background, and Loki's like, no variant, right? Because nothing matters, it doesn't matter. Hiddleston is so on fire, enjoying himself in this scene. Like, the smile beaming across his face as he's throwing things around and just, like, ranting like a lunatic because he's right. Like, there's nothing that Loki loves more than being right. And when there's no variation scale, all of a sudden Mobius is like, oh snap, like, you're onto something. Like, this is it. This is how we're going to find them. And we get right back to Loki and Mobius on the move. They go back to where they are, and they basically, Mobius pulls down all of the disasters. Like, this is what we got to do. All the disasters or all the apocalypses in the world that are like natural disasters, completely random, like there's no setup, there's no way anybody can know it's coming. Those are going to be the ones that we figure out. They start going through all these files, and you see like they do kind of like a fast forward. Loki's passed out, and Mobius is like, "Hey, come on, let's go take a break from this for a few minutes." And you get this unbelievable jet ski convo inside the break room, where, Loki kind of asks him, he's like, what's the deal with the jet ski stuff? And you kind of get to see Mobius continue to fawn over 90s trends. He glows about, back in the 90s, though, for a brief period of time, we had jet skis, and they were everything, man. And he just kind of talks about the things that he likes. And Loki's like, why don't you've never ridden on a jet ski? Like, do it. And Mobius is like, I'm pretty sure if a time analyst rode a jet ski, that would totally create a variation. I'm not about that, And Loki just starts questioning everything, right? He's like, it's this relatableness, the way that they can play with each other. It's like, we're the only, Loki literally says, like, we're the only one that's free, right? Like, if everything is predetermined and there is no free will, and the people in the TVA are the only ones that are free, why don't you go ride on a jet ski, man? Like, enjoy life. And, Mobius is more like, that's not my purpose. I have a divine purpose working here, and I gotta do my job. And, Loki starts to then question the timekeepers and this kind of Wizard of Oz aspect of, like, what's behind the curtain? You've never seen these guys. You've never met these guys. And the whole story of, like, the timekeepers creating the TVA and creating all of you guys to keep the timeline in check. Like, it's just ridiculous. Like, come on, Mobius, you and me. We get each other. Like, open up your eyes and let's, like, figure out how to beat these fools. And Mobius just kind of responds with, like, who's your parents? Oh yeah, a frost giant. And who raised you? Odin, like a god, and you lived in this magical fairyland. Like, if you really start thinking about where you come from, it all sounds kind of ridiculous. The fact of the matter is this is real for me because I believe it's real. And you just kind of get this one kind of sadness. Like, there's something there's a vulnerability for Loki to play on here, where, like, Mobius kind of wants things, wants to experience life, and he can't. And he can't because he chooses not to, because that's what his job is. His purpose is to do his job. And it's a really interesting inside look at both him and Loki, as Loki kind of comes back and forth. And you end up landing on this line where Loki's just like, look, man, like, no one bad is ever truly bad. And no one good is ever just truly good. Like, there are two sides to every coin. And the minute he says that, it's like one of those click moments, and you see it in Wilson's eyes. Like, the way he plays it is perfect. And he's like, oh, you scared little boy, you are super clever. And Loki's just like, I know that I'm smart and clever. What is going on? And it's at this point that, Mobius brings him to, like, the candy box. And he's like, look, when we went to, like, this other spot in France, there was this gum, and I gave it for them, and they didn't find anything, and they just put it here. But now there's two variables. He's like, there's the fact that there's this apocalypse situation, and then the fact that, like you said, not all people that are bad are truly bad. Well, this version of Loki isn't totally bad. They're carrying around gum that they can give to kids and things of that nature. So the kablooey gum, like, that's the answer right there. It's wherever kablooey gum is from. Whatever the apocalypse is, that's the one. And, Wilson immediately grabs a bunch of files. They sit down, they start going through it, and boom, Loki pinpoints it. And he's like, I've got it. It's Alabama, 2050. There's this massive hurricane, and it's inside of this, like, little 3-year span. I think it's 2047 to 2051 that Kablooey was made. And he's like, it's the perfect spot. Like, they have, it's called a Rocks Cart. It's kind of like a Walmart or a Target. Like, they're just this giant kind of store that has everything. He's like, all the supplies, all the food, everything you need. And if you could just go back to this moment in time, you can just keep reliving that. Like, every time you need to set up, go right back before that hurricane really takes off, and everything that you're doing or planning or plotting, TVA is never gonna figure it out. And of course, Mobius goes directly to Renslayer with that, and she continues to tell him not to trust Loki, but he's chomping at the bit, man. Like, Wilson, you get classic Wilson in this back and forth with Renslayer, where he's like, but we figured it out. Like, we can go stop this Loki right now. Let me go do my job. So she says, okay, go for it. B-15 walks in. Mobius is all like pumped, and he's like buddy with Loki, where he's giving him like a pruner, like a pruning stick. And immediately B-15 Saku just comes in and grabs it. It's like, no way, puts it away, and then she kind of gives the briefing. During the briefing, she kind of like sets everything up. And once they get to Alabama, I love the score shift. It gets like terrifying to a degree, man. Like, the score is just playing into the visual that we see outside of the Rocks cart as like things destroy signs, and the wind is blowing trees over, the rain's in, and you see the TVA show up, and as they come inside, you get this wonderful moment where Loki's dripping wet, and he uses his magic because they're outside the TVA to dry himself, and B-15 is me like, what was that? He's like, drying myself, so unlike you fools, I won't be noticed because no squeaky feet. But like immediately, it just kind of throws B-15 off. Like, he can use his magic now. Like, that's not cool. And then you get Wilson kind of breaking everything down. Like, hey, we're gonna split up in two teams. Me and Loki are gonna go check out the greenhouse area, and B-15's like, no. You can take B-22 or whatever the guy is in that group. Loki stays with me. And Mobius like starts to protest, and Loki's like, look, I gotta earn people's trust. I get that. I'm fine. I'll stay with her. And what's great is as you kind of see them setting up their plan, you go to the security room that has all the cameras, and there's that cloaked figure, man, that Lady Loki, watching everything. It's the perfect setup, right? Like, if you're in the security office, and that's where you go every time, you got all the supplies inside the store, but the security office, you can see everything. So if the TVA ever does show up, you'll know before they actually get there. So, you jump now to B-15 and Loki, and they're walking kind of through, and you're trying to see if they can trust each other, and all of a sudden there's some dude just buying plants, or looking at plants, and they're both like, freeze! He's like, hurricane sale on azaleas, they're half off. And, B-15's like, is that you? He's like, well, I probably would have wore a suit, but it could be me. So, like, on guard, she's got her pruning stick out, and as she gets close, homeboy just grabs her, and you see this flow of green energy come through, just like what happened to C-20. When her the green energy kind of came through her face, lit up her eyes. Same thing happens to Masaku, and all of a sudden, Lady Loki has now possessed her, and you get this amazing stretch for Masaku where she is literally doing her best Tom Hiddleston Loki impression, and watching them go back and forth, and like the moments where they smile or kind of like acknowledge each other. Really, really great stuff. And like as they're kind of going back and forth, Loki kind of talking about, he's like, obviously, like, you're me. And she's like, if anyone is anyone, you're me. And it's this idea of like a Loki that is more superior than our Loki, and just how that grinds his gears. And you can see it anytime there's like she challenges or tries to say that she's better. Definitely grinds Hiddleston's gears a little bit. But from there, we jump back into a different TVA agent as they come in, showing no compassion to these people. This one guy's like, hey, are you guys from FEMA? Do you have transportation? We got kids and women. Like, we should get people out of here. And this guy just has no compassion. Like, you get this wonderful little moment from Mobius where he's like, hey, like, we know that these guys, like, and the guy's like, he should be scared, and, like, they're all going to die. And he's like, a little compassion for these people. And it's like one of these things where, like, Mobius seems to be the most human of all the people who work at the TVA, and that emotional connection, I'm telling you, this guy has something to play somewhere in the storyline. But then they find C-20. She's just muttering to herself, like, it was real. It had to be real. Like, clearly whatever that possession did messed up her brain. Kind of like when Wanda possessed, people's brains and kind of gave them, false realities. Like, is that what Lady Loki is doing to be able to possess them? Like, sends their mind somewhere else? I don't know, but I'm loving the C-20 performance there. Then we go back to Loki, and he kind of mentions, like, the possession aspect, talking to Masaku. Like, that's where he goes, kind of cowardly. And it's one of those, like, I think it just grinds his gears that he doesn't know how to do possession. And it's something that kind of bothers him. And Lady Loki, Masaku, dude, like, just the grin. She's so good in this whole stretch. But she's like, yeah, it's almost as cowardly as working for the TVA. And here I thought that they found a better version of me. And, you just get this kind of interesting back and forth with her and Loki where it's like, you don't understand. Like, I did all the things that I did to try to help you. And, as she's moving, all of a sudden, like, Masaku transfers to someone else. It's a Rocks cart employee, and she drops, and then the banter continues. And at one point, this is where I'm like, semi-questioning if she's actually Lady Loki, because at one point he kind of says Loki, and the dude is like, whoa, don't call me Loki. And it was very like abrupt. You're like, that's interesting. She's like, you can call me like whatever this guy's name is instead. But you kind of, in this portion of the sequence, you hear Loki kind of talking about how, like, look, dude, I have a plan to overthrow the Timekeepers. I think you and me, we could team up, man. And it's one of these, like, is he really looking to team up with her? Is he playing her to catch her because he doesn't want there to be a better version of himself? Does he actually care about, Mobius? I don't know about the TVA, but I think he actually cares about Mobius. And you kind of will see more of that, like, conflict right at the end. But after she freaks out about being not called, like, don't call me Loki, call me this guy's name. We jump back and C20, finally a little lucid, is about to be taken to the TVA infirmary, and she's like, no, you don't understand. I gave it away. I told him, like, how to and where the Timekeepers are. Now, I don't know what that means, because, like, is it just like I told him how to get to the TVA? Because if Mobius has never seen the Timekeepers, why would C20 know where they are? You know what I mean? And it's one of these things where it's like, it seems like only Renslayer knows stuff. So is maybe C20 somebody working for Renslayer? That just popped into my brain. Like, that maybe could be the person who brought the Franklin Delano, like the FDR high school pen. Maybe C20 knows more information than she's letting on. It's kind of a passing beat, so I'll be interested to see if they go back to it at all next episode with that character. But from there, we see Lady Loki starting to start to rig all these reset charges. You see the cloaked version of her running around and starting to, like, connect wires and things, and then all of a sudden, we jump back, and that's where it's like she can possess somebody and be doing things. So our Loki is distracted while she's setting everything up. And this whole section is great because she drops from the guy who works at Roxcart to this just huge freaking dude, and you start kind of getting this more aggressive back and forth between Loki and Lady Loki potentially, and they get into like a full-on fight. And it's great, man. This whole stretch is just choreographed wonderfully. It's shot wonderfully. The lighting inside the store is perfect. The score is kicking big time. And you get another one of these moments where, like, Loki gets flipped as he continues to try to, like, talk and, like, just tell me what's going on. Like, show yourself. Stop hiding. What is really happening? Give me some answers. And he gets thrown and he hits the ground and he just kind of goes, I would never treat me like this. Like, the second time in the episode, it was like, maybe she's not Lady Loki. Everything in the episode certainly points to her being Lady Loki. I don't think the TVA's temporal aura analysis would be off. But there's some questioning out there. Like, those two moments on my second watch, like, kind of made me question the whole, is she Lady Loki? This show, man, the writing is so good. It really does keep you on your toes quite well. But at this point, like, we are getting close to the end of the episode, right? And you flip back. They're trying to find B-15. She's unconscious. Mobius catches up with her, and one of the other TVA agents, like, looks like your favorite Loki betrayed you, Mobius. And, like, again, like, your favorite Loki? I think there is a respect. There's an admiration for Mobius, like, towards Loki, and that kind of, again, just kind of confirms that stuff, and like almost like that he's kind of a fan of him. The whole Mobius, and like I want more background on Mobius and what his deal is as far as it goes with Loki. But then we finally get our Lady Loki reveal, right? Like, you see the guy that's kind of like messing with things, and Loki's just like, what is going on? Tell me what's going on. And that guy all of a sudden collapses, and you hear, like, on the speakers, exactly what Loki just said. And as he spins, there's the cloaked Loki with two glowing green hands, who's got that audio that he just said kind of playing on a loop in the TVs through some sort of magic. And then the hood drops, and there's your reveal, baby. Lady Loki, man, she got the little tiny horns on her crown, not the big ones. And like I said, I mean, it could also, be not Lady Loki. I'm not 100% sure, but the show is certainly depicting her very much like Lady Loki. I've heard outside, like, not rumors, but theories that maybe she's Enchantress. I don't know. I'm still getting the Lady Loki vibes. And that's, it's a reveal where it's like, oh man, like, she just looked cool. I was like, yes, there we go. And the first thing that she says, like, the first words out of her mouth are, this isn't about you. And I think it's because it's not about Loki. It's not even about her. It's about whatever the bigger goal is, whatever this whole reset charge timeline disruption thing is, and who Lady Loki is working for. When she says it's not about you, I think she means it's all about Kang. But as she gets the resets going, you see like them starting to go off, and like one by one they're all starting to connect to each other, and you get this wide shot where you just see like a whole section of the room start to light up orange and then light up purple as like that mist comes in as the resets are getting ready to go. It's like, it looks like 100 something charges, man. Like there are so many. And then like you see that she's connected them all to like that little like phone like computer thing that allows you to like access TVA doors, and little doors open up underneath all of them, and they all drop. And you're just like, what? Like, messing up the timeline in a big, major way. And as that happens, you know, you see Mobius start to be like, where are they all going? And on the timeline reader inside of the TVA, you see the timeline, you just see break, all these branches breaking off. And like I said, I don't think this is the creation of the multiverse, but this could be the multiversal war type thing that opens the multiverse up for, I think, the accessibility of different universes to crash into each other, which is how we could get, you know, the Spider-Man movie, how this will probably play into the Multiverse of Madness story. But what she's doing is dropping all of these reset charge bombs into certain places. And up on the screen, you can actually see as the branches are happening underneath all the places that they're going to. Now, I'm not going to lie to you, I was trying to figure this out myself, but I don't have a lot of time these days, so I went to Nerdist, and Nerdist figured out, put the connections to some of the places that I couldn't. And when you're looking at all the different spots, there are a bunch of places that we know simply from the MCU, places like Vormir, Asgard, Sakaar, Ego, Titan, Hala, Xandar. Like, all these different MCU spots that could play major roles for different characters or different points in the MCU timeline. We also have a bunch of American cities that don't really connect to anything. Thornton, USA, Cookville, USA. You know, there's like a New York in 1947. And like some of these, you know, it could be some of the ones that don't have like any kind of ultimate meaning kind of have little comic book nods to them. But then there's a whole slew of places, you know, like 1984 Japan, where there were multiple disasters and political figureheads moving around. Someplace like Batichara in 1808, where the Cabrera municipality was instituted back then. Someplace like Rome, where you had a lot of papal drama. Like, there are all these different locations and moments in time that I think are like linchpin moments. You know, moments when like a certain, you know, group or place kind of grew or expanded or took over. And if all these charges are being dropped in these areas and wiping those potentially important sacred timeline moments out, that could just be making the timeline vulnerable for somebody to attack it. And if you're going by the logic of Kang the Conqueror, it could be the moment in all of these different universes and timelines that these different Kangs need to conquer these different areas. And if you get those resets, maybe those areas become way vulnerable and way easier for Kang to conquer. And that would line up with why Lady Loki would be working with Kang. If that's what we get, I don't know, but that's where I'm putting all my eggs are going into that basket, man. Like, Lady Loki has been working with Kang to disrupt the timeline so that Kang can take things over. And I think ultimately Kang is gonna want to basically be the ruler of all time and space. And that's an interesting concept, and I would love to see it go that way because it would just make me feel smart about myself. But as you kind of see all of this happening, we get this little montage again. The score is crushing through this whole sequence. Renslayer looks really pissed, and she grabs a pruning stick from her collection that belonged to an A23. Like, in her collection of trophies, there's like an A23 helmet and a pruning stick. She grabs the pruning stick. We don't see where she goes with that pruning stick, or understand if that maybe is hers and she retired. Like, was she a TVA agent first? Does she have a special connection to this A23? I'm very interested to see if we get more details about that stick, but we see her dash off, and then we jump back into the Rocks cart, and you see kind of Loki like realizing what's happening and like, oh my goodness, and all the lights flip red, and this just is so visually stunning, and it's this really interesting kind of moment for this version of Loki. Like, are we about to get the hint on what Loki is really up to, what he's trying? Is he looking out for himself? Is he looking to really help Mobius out? And he sees Lady Loki go through one of those doors, and she doesn't close that door. And then you get this really heartbreaking moment where you see Mobius and the TVA agents running toward Loki, and Mobius is just screaming, "Loki, no! Stop! Don't do it!" And it's like this heartbreaking moment because you really do like these two guys, and you're really starting to enjoy them working together. And like I said, it feels like there's a little bit of respect, a little bit of trust between these two. And I don't think Loki has any other choice, because Loki ultimately is always looking out for himself, but he also needs to find the answer. He needs to stop a version of Loki that's more superior. Like, he doesn't want that. It's one of those things that Mobius says, and I think it's a fact. It grinds his gears that someone is more talented than he is. And he is going to want to figure all of that out, and what this whole plan and what everything is. The only way to do it is to follow. So he runs through the door disappears, and it's one of those, like, did Lady Loki leave that open so that, like, he could come through? Because it stayed open just long enough for him to run through and then disappeared. And Owen Wilson is just like, no, man, like, why? And it's a killer beat, and that's where the episode ends. And I'm just enthralled by this show. I am so highly entertained. The writing is so good. The production value is so good. The directing, the acting, everything. And like I said, from one episode to the next, is just a massive improvement already. Or not a slight improvement, but like these episodes are just getting stronger and better as we move through. And this story has got me so fascinated, man. And I know I am locked in on this Kang theory, working with what I think to be Lady Loki. That doesn't mean that that's what's going on, right? I think Kang could potentially be behind some of the TVA weirdness. I think that there's a small outside shot that maybe it's not Lady Loki. But ultimately, I just love the way that this episode, The Variant, gives us all sorts of answers and then all sorts of more questions. And like I said last week, if you've got a good mystery miniseries, that's what it should do. It should raise questions, it should raise mysteries, but it should also give us answers and give us satisfying conclusions. And so far, like I said, the urgency in this show is easily the most out of the three. It feels like it has a purpose, it feels like it has a lot to do, and it doesn't want to waste any time in what it's doing. And every moment of this show so far feels super important to our overall MCU story, even more so than the other two shows. So, Loki, episode 2, off and running in a big bad way. I gave it a 4.6 out of 5 on my non-spoiler review. I love this episode. I just went through everything, so now it's your turn, man. Give me all your spoiler thoughts. What'd you like about this episode? What are your theories? What do you think is really going on? Is that Lady Loki? Or should we be listening to the things that she says, like, don't call me Loki? And when he's like, I wouldn't do that to myself. Could it be somebody different, somebody impersonating a Loki? We threw that out there in week 1, that maybe this person isn't Loki. Maybe it's someone impersonating Loki. Do you think they're working with Kang? Is this whole, time reset charge thing a big plot to disrupt the timeline in a way to make it vulnerable for somebody to attack all the different universes? Anything you're thinking, theory-wise, what you liked or didn't like about the episode, where you're at just in general with Loki and the MCU, put it all down below, man. Good, bad, indifferent, into the comments section. Look forward to talking to you down there. As always, if you enjoyed this video, please give me a thumbs up. And if you're new, you want to come hang out with the C-Man as we approach our final 4 episodes. It's crazy that we're only down to 4 of these 6-episode things, man. Make these shows longer. But we got 4 weeks left. You want to be here for all of that? Anything we got going on with TV, movie, trailer reactions, you just like what I'm doing, you want to show the C-Man a little support, well, then come join C-Maniac Nation. You can do that by jumping over there, hitting that subscribe button, hit that little bell if you want those alerts. Until next time, for the C-Man's Cinema, sit down. I've been the C-Man, and I'm signing off. Peace. Oh, hey, what's going on? You must be sticking around because you're looking for more content featuring this guy. Well, guess what? You're in the right place. You can check out more videos right here and right here. And if you have and you want to come join that C-Maniac Nation, you can hit that subscribe right over there.